The pre-dawn darkness clung to the Ardennes forest like a shroud. Captain James Hawk Morrison's breath formed ghostly plumes in the frozen cockpit of his P-47 Thunderbolt as he checked his instruments for the third time. Below him, somewhere in that impenetrable sea of fog and ancient pine, the largest German offensive since D-Day was unfolding what would later be known as the Battle of the Bulge. But Hawk wasn't thinking about the big picture. He was thinking about fuel. Red Leader, this is Red 3. I'm showing 20 minutes until bingo fuel. We need to RTB. The voice of Lieutenant Danny Kowalski crackled through the radio, barely audible over the engine's roar. Hawk glanced at his own gauge. They were running on fumes and prayers. The entire Flight 6 Thunderbolts from the 362nd Fighter Group had been airborne since before dawn, flying a fruitless search pattern over German-held territory. Supreme Headquarters had intercepted radio chatter about a priority convoy moving through the Schnee Eifel, but so far, they'd found nothing but fog, snow, and emptiness. Copy that, Red 3. 5 more minutes, then we... The words died in his throat. There, emerging from the mist like a vision from hell itself, was a sight that would haunt him for the rest of his life. A convoy. Not just any convoy, but a massive serpent of vehicles stretching back into the fog as far as he could see. Tanks, half-tracks, trucks loaded with supplies, fuel tankers, all painted in winter camouflage, rolling west toward the American lines. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was what was on those vehicles. "Jesus Christ," whispered Lieutenant Marcus Webb over the radio. "Are those bodies?" Hawk pushed his stick forward, dropping through a gap in the clouds for a closer look. His heart hammered against his ribs. Scattered across the roofs of the trucks, draped over tank turrets, hanging from the sides of vehicles like grotesque ornaments, were what appeared to be dozens of corpses in American uniforms. "Red Leader. Those are our boys." Kowalski's voice had gone hollow. "Those bastards are using our dead as shields, as camouflage, as psychological warfare." The German convoy was displaying American casualties like trophies, betting that Allied pilots wouldn't fire on vehicles covered with their own dead comrades. Hawk's blood turned to ice, then to fire. His finger moved to the trigger, but his training held him back. Something wasn't right. The convoy was too perfect, too exposed. Why would they risk moving such a massive force in the open, even with this fog? "Red Flight, form up. We're going in for a closer look. Weapons tight until I give the order." As Hawk banked his Thunderbolt into a wide circle, movement caught his eye. The rear hatch of one of the half-tracks had fallen open, and something tumbled out onto the road. Not something. Someone. An American soldier, very much alive, scrambling away from the convoy before German guards dragged him back. "They've got prisoners!" Webb shouted. "Live prisoners mixed with the dead!" The realization hit Hawk like flak. This wasn't just a supply convoy. It was an evacuation moving captured Americans deeper into German territory, using their own fallen brothers as human shields, making any attack attempt a nightmare of moral calculus. And there, at the head of the convoy, Hawk spotted something that made his blood run colder still. A command car flying not the standard Wehrmacht banner, but a black flag with silver SS runes. Leaning against it was a tall officer in a leather coat, seemingly unconcerned by the aircraft circling overhead. Even from 800 feet up, Hawk could see the man was watching them, waiting, daring them to attack. "Red Leader, fuel critical," Kowalski urged. "We need to decide. Now." Hawk's mind raced. They had minutes of ammunition, seconds of fuel, and a situation with no good answers. If they attacked, they'd kill American prisoners and desecrate American dead. If they didn't, this convoy would disappear into Germany, and those prisoners would vanish into the nightmare of SS captivity if they were lucky enough to make it that far. Behind them, the sun was beginning to paint the eastern sky, blood red. Then Hawk saw it, a detail so small he almost missed it. One of the corpses on a nearby truck had moved its hand. Just a slight gesture, a finger extended, pointing down toward the vehicle's cargo bed. The American POWs weren't just victims. They were trying to communicate. Red Flight. This is Red Leader. Hawk's voice was steady now, cold as the morning air. I want eyes on every vehicle in that convoy. Look for signals. Look for movement. Look for anything that tells us where our people are. We've got one shot at this, and we're not leaving anyone behind. Copy that, Red Leader, Webb responded. But Hawk, we've got maybe 10 minutes of fuel. If we commit to this, then we commit. Hawk cut him off. Mark your targets. We're going to turn this ghost convoy into a real graveyard. But first, we need to know which vehicles are carrying our boys. As the 6 Thunderbolts split into pairs and dropped lower through the fog, Hawk noticed something else. The convoy had stopped. Every vehicle had halted, engines still running, creating a wall of exhaust that mixed with the morning mist. The SS officer was still standing by his command car, but now he was holding something. A radio handset. He was calling for backup. Red Leader. It was Lieutenant Sarah Chen from Red 6, one of the 2 pilots covering the rear of the formation. I've got bandits. 3. No. 4. Jesus. 6 bogies coming up from the south. ME 109 seconds by the profile. Hawk's stomach dropped. They were flying worn-out P-47 seconds on fume tank fuel, loaded with ground attack ordnance, and now German fighters were vectoring in. The convoy had been bait. A trap. The SS officer below dropped the radio handset and looked up at Hawk's aircraft. Even from this distance, Hawk swore he could see the man smile. Red Flight. This is it. Hawk's voice cut through the sudden chaos of alarm calls and spotted contacts. Chen! Webb! You've got the 109 seconds. The rest of you on me. We're making our run now. But the prisoners, Kowalski started, are dead if we don't stop this convoy. Hawk rolled his Thunderbolt over, the heavy aircraft responding like a falling anvil. All aircraft, weapons free. Aim for the vehicles without bodies. Hit the fuel trucks, hit the command car, and for God's sake, watch your fire. The world exploded into violence. Behind them, Chen and Webb climbed to meet the German fighters, their engines screaming in protest. Below, the convoy erupted in chaos as German soldiers scattered and anti-aircraft guns swung skyward. Tracer fire filled the air like deadly fireflies. And Hawk dove straight into the teeth of it, his finger closing on the trigger, knowing that in the next 60 seconds, he would either save dozens of American lives or end them himself. The first truck in his sights had no bodies on it. Hawk squeezed, and his 8 .50 caliber machine guns turned the vehicle into scrap metal and fire. The second truck exploded in a fireball, a fuel tanker. The third truck had an American corpse draped across its hood. Hawk's finger froze on the trigger for a fatal half-second. The truck driver was swerving, trying to use the body as a shield. The SS officer's cruel genius became clear. Make every target a moral dilemma. Slow down the attack. Give the fighters time to arrive. But then Hawk saw it again. Another gesture from another corpse. This one dragged itself to the edge of a truck bed and dropped off, rolling into a ditch. Not all the dead were dead. Some were playing dead to survive, and some were sacrificing themselves to mark the safe targets. Red Flight, concentrate fire on vehicles marked with double white crosses on the sides, Hawk called out. The prisoners are marking their own trucks. It was a desperate gambit, relying on hand signals and painted marks that could easily be misread in the chaos of combat. But it was all they had. Hawk lined up his next shot and fired. The dawn erupted in thunder and fire. And somewhere in that maelstrom of steel and courage, the ghost convoy began to die. But not before it would claim its own terrible price. Lieutenant Sarah Chen yanked her control stick hard right as tracer rounds stitched the air where her P-47 had been a heartbeat before. The ME 109 that had fired screamed past her canopy, so close she could see the pilot's face, young, determined, and absolutely committed to killing her. "Red 6, you've got 2 more on your tail." Webb's voice crackled with static and adrenaline. "Brake left! Now!" Chen didn't think. She threw her thunderbolt into a violent snap roll that would have torn the wings off a lesser aircraft. The German fighters, lighter and more maneuverable, followed her like wolves pursuing wounded prey. But Chen had something they didn't: desperation, and a P-47 that could take punishment like a flying tank. She dove straight down, past the fleeing convoy, past the altitude where sane pilots operated, her airspeed indicator climbing into the red. The 109 seconds followed, their pilots confident in their superior aircraft. But Chen was counting on something else. She was counting on German overconfidence and American engineering. At 800 feet, with the forest reaching up to grab her, Chen pulled hard. The G-forces crushed her into her seat. Her vision tunneled to a pinpoint. Every rivet in the Thunderbolt screamed in protest. But the aircraft held together. Behind her, one of the Me-109 seconds pulled up successfully. The other didn't. It clipped a tree and cartwheeled into the forest in a ball of orange flame. "One down!" Chen gasped into her radio. "Webb, where the hell are you?" "Little busy." Webb's transmission was punctuated by the hammering of his guns. "I've got 3 of them playing tag with me. And wait, scratch one. The bastard flew right into Kowalski's line of fire." But even as small victories accumulated above, the real battle was unfolding below. On the ground, inside Transport Truck 7, Corporal Tommy Reeves pressed himself against the cold metal floor of the truck, his hands still bound behind his back with wire that had long since cut into his wrists. Around him, 43 other American prisoners lay in various states of injury and terror. Some were unconscious. Some were praying. And some, like Tommy, were listening to the screaming symphony of the air battle overhead and trying to calculate their odds of survival. Those odds weren't good. The truck swerved violently as the German driver panicked. Someone in the back screamed. A burst of machine gun fire, American. 50 cal by the sound shredded the canvas cover above them, and suddenly daylight poured in through a dozen holes. "Everyone stay down," shouted Sergeant Frank Decker, the senior NCO who'd kept them alive through 3 days of captivity.
"Our boys are coming for us, but they can't tell which trucks are which."
"We're all gonna die." Private Morrison, no relation to Hawk, was sobbing now. "They're gonna shoot us all." "Shut your mouth, Morrison," Decker snapped. But Tommy could hear the fear beneath the sergeant's command voice. Decker knew the terrible mathematics of the situation just as well as anyone. That's when Tommy noticed something that made his heart stop. Through the bullet holes in the canvas, he could see into the truck bed ahead of them. It wasn't carrying prisoners. It was carrying wooden crates, each one stenciled with German markings. And on the side of one crate partially visible where the wood had splintered, he saw something that made his blood run cold. A radiation trefoil symbol. Tommy had seen that symbol before, once, in a classified briefing back in England that he wasn't supposed to remember. The briefing that had used words like uranium, heavy water, and German atomic research. "Sergeant," Tommy's voice was barely a whisper. "Sergeant Decker, we've got a problem." Besides the obvious, Decker crawled over, ignoring the protests from the wounded men he had to move past. Tommy nodded toward the holes in the canvas. "Look at the truck ahead. Tell me what you see." Decker looked. His face went pale. "Is that what I think it is? If you think it's material for an atomic bomb, then yeah." The truck swerved again, and through the chaos, Tommy heard something else. A sound that sent ice through his veins. The high-pitched whistle of a bomb falling. "Incoming!" Decker threw himself over 2 of the wounded men. The explosion hit 40 yards away, close enough to lift the rear wheels of their truck off the ground. When Tommy's ears stopped ringing, he realized 3 things simultaneously. 1, they were still alive. 2, the truck ahead of them, the one with the radioactive cargo, was still intact. 3, the German guards had abandoned their posts and were running for cover. "Sergeant," Tommy said quietly, I know how we survive this. Decker looked at him. I'm listening. We mark the truck ahead. Make sure the pilots know it's priority target number 1. That cargo can't make it to Germany. You're talking about directing American fire while we're sitting right here? I'm talking about making sure those pilots know which truck to hit, even if it means we don't walk away from this. For a long moment, Decker just stared at him. Then, slowly, the sergeant nodded. You got a plan? Tommy did. A terrible one. Someone needs to get on top of this truck and signal the pilots. White crosses painted on the safe vehicles, that was smart. But we need to mark the target. Something big. Something they can't miss. That's suicide. The guards. The anti-aircraft fire. I'm already dead, Sarge. Tommy held up his hands, showing the infected wounds where the wire had cut through his skin. Gangrene setting in. I felt the fever start yesterday. But I can still climb. And I can still light a flare. We don't have flares. Tommy smiled grimly. No. But the Germans do. I saw them in the command car when they loaded us up. We just need someone fast enough to grab them. Above -8, 0555 hours. Hawk pulled out of his third strafing run with his aircraft shot full of holes and his ammunition nearly depleted. He destroyed 4 vehicles, 2 fuel trucks, a half-track, and a supply lorry, but the convoy was far from stopped. And now, with the German fighters pressing the attack above, his squadron was being torn apart. Red 2 is hit. Red 2 is hit. Kowalski's voice was shrill with panic. I'm losing hydraulics. I've got fire in the engine. Kowalski, bail out, Hawk ordered. That's an order. Cant controls are locked. Trying to back. The radio went silent. Hawk watched in horror as Kowalski's P-47, trailing black smoke, went into a flat spin and disappeared into the forest. No parachute. No chance. They'd lost one. Red leader, fuel critical, Chen called out. All aircraft are in emergency reserves. We need to break off or we're swimming home. Hawk's jaw clenched. Break off now, and the convoy would escape. Some of it, anyway. Enough to get those prisoners deep into Germany, where they'd never be found. Enough to... Movement below caught his eye. A figure had climbed onto the roof of one of the prisoners' trucks. An American soldier, hands behind his back, balanced precariously on the swaying vehicle as anti-aircraft fire erupted all around him. The man was kicking something, dragging something with his feet. A signal flare, and then Hawk understood. The soldier had somehow grabbed German flares and was using his feet to maneuver them. As Hawk watched, the prisoner fell to his knees, still on the truck roof, clearly visible to every German soldier in the convoy, and carefully nudged one of the flares into position. The flare ignited. Brilliant red smoke billowed up, marking one specific truck in the middle of the convoy. Not the truck the prisoner was on, the one directly ahead. The message was clear. Hit this truck. Hit it now. Hit it no matter what. Red leader? What's that crazy bastard doing? Webb had seen it too. Hawk didn't answer immediately. He was too busy processing what he was seeing. The prisoner, whoever he was, had painted a target on a specific vehicle even though he was right next to it. Even though he had to know what would happen when American bombs and bullets found their mark. This wasn't just bravery. This was sacrifice. All Red Flight aircraft. Hawk's voice was steel. I want every remaining round of ammunition into that truck with the red smoke. Everything we have. Now. But Hawk, our guys, are asking us to take the shot. All aircraft. Weapons free on that single target. Go. Hawk rolled his Thunderbolt into a near-vertical dive, pushing his battered aircraft past its limits one more time. His gun sight centered on the smoke, on the truck, on whatever cargo was so important that an American soldier was willing to die to ensure it never reached Germany. Time seemed to slow. He could see the prisoner on the truck roof, still standing despite the chaos, now using his bound hands to wave frantically at the other prisoner's truck, warning them, trying to tell them to take cover. He could see German soldiers running toward the smoking truck, finally realizing what the American was doing. He could see the SS officer from the command car, standing in the middle of the road, his sidearm drawn, aiming up at the prisoner, and he could see what looked like wooden crates through the torn canvas of the target truck. Crates with markings he'd only seen once before, in a classified briefing about German weapons research. Hawk's finger tightened on the trigger. The world became fire. The explosion that consumed Transport Truck 6 was unlike anything Hawk had ever seen. It started as a normal fireball, the expected result of 8 .50 caliber machine guns, shredding a vehicle at close range. But then, as the wooden crates ruptured and their contents mixed with burning fuel and ammunition, the flames changed. They turned from orange to a sickly green-white, and the smoke that billowed up wasn't black but gray, thick, and somehow wrong. Red Leader. What the hell was in that truck? Chen's voice carried a note of primal fear. That smoke. Don't fly through it, Hawk shouted. All aircraft, avoid the smoke cloud. Climb and vector east. But even as he gave the order, Hawk saw something that made his blood freeze. The prisoner, the one who'd marked the target, was still on the roof of the adjacent truck. The explosion had thrown him clear, but not far enough. He was crawling now, trying to get away from the spreading chemical fire, his bound hands making every movement a struggle. And the German SS officer was walking toward him through the flames. The officer moved with deliberate calm, his leather coat somehow untouched by the inferno around him. He reached the American prisoner, grabbed him by his collar with one hand, and with the other, drew his Luger. Hawk was already diving before he consciously made the decision. Red Leader. Negative. You don't have the altitude. Webb's warning came too late. The thunderbolt dropped like a stone, Hawk's guns spitting their last rounds. The ground came up fast, too fast. He wasn't going to make it. He'd miscalculated, let emotion override training, and now he was going to crater into French soil at 300 miles per hour. Then, something extraordinary happened. The SS officer looked up at the diving aircraft. For one impossible moment, his eyes met Hawk's through 500 feet of air and bulletproof glass. The German smiled, actually smiled, and raised his Luger, not at the prisoner, but at the sky, at Hawk. He fired. The bullet, impossibly, struck Hawk's canopy. It didn't penetrate, but it created a spiderweb fracture right in his line of sight. Hawk's vision blurred, his depth perception destroyed at the worst possible moment. He pulled up blind, yanking the stick with everything he had. The Thunderbolt's belly cleared the burning truck by inches. Hawk felt the heat even through the aircraft's armor. His engine coughed, sucked in toxic smoke, and began to die. "I'm hit!" Hawk called out, though technically he'd hit himself. "Engine's quitting! I'm going down!" Red Leader, where Chen's voice was cut off by the staccato of machine gun fire. The German fighters had found her again. Hawk's engine seized completely. The propeller windmilled uselessly. He had maybe 30 seconds of glide time before this 7-ton aircraft became a very expensive coffin. Below, through the cracked canopy, he saw the SS officer still standing in the road. The prisoner was on his knees now, hands still bound. The German had his Luger pressed against the American's head. Hawk couldn't save him, couldn't save himself, couldn't save any of them. And then, from the tree line, something streaked across the road. Not a vehicle, a person, moving so fast they were almost a blur. They tackled the SS officer mid-execution, and both figures disappeared into the smoke. Hawk didn't have time to process what he'd seen. The ground was coming up, and he had to choose where to die. He aimed for a clearing beyond the convoy and prepared for the worst landing of his life. On the ground, Transport Truck 7. Sergeant Decker had exactly 3 seconds to make a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The explosion had torn through Truck 6, sending flaming debris in every direction. Some of it had hit their truck. Canvas was burning. Men were screaming. And through the chaos, Decker could see Tommy Reeves on his knees in the road, a German officer about to execute him. 3 seconds. 1. Decker assessed the situation. The German guards who'd been watching them had scattered when the shooting started. The truck's rear gate was already damaged from earlier strafing runs. They could escape, too. But if they ran now, Tommy would die alone. And more than that, the SS officer would escape. Whatever secrets this convoy held, that man knew them all.
3. Decker moved. "Everyone who can move, out!"
He roared.
"Grab weapons from the dead! We're taking this convoy!"
It was insane. 43 wounded, half-starved American prisoners going up against trained SS troops and Wehrmacht soldiers. But Decker had learned something in 3 years of war. Desperation made men capable of impossible things. The Americans poured from the truck like angry wasps from a destroyed hive. Private Morrison, the one who'd been sobbing minutes before, was the first to reach a fallen German soldier. He grabbed the man's MP-40 submachine gun and started firing with wild, grief-fueled accuracy. Decker himself ran straight toward Tommy and the SS officer, knowing he'd never make it in time, knowing Tommy was already dead, but running anyway because that's what sergeants did. Then someone else got there first. A figure in a tattered American uniform, but wrong somehow, too fast, too fluid, moving like they'd been trained by someone other than the U.S. Army. The figure hit the SS officer like a freight train, knocking the Luger wide just as it fired. Decker skidded to a stop, staring. It was a woman, mid-30s, dark hair matted with blood, eyes that had seen things Decker couldn't imagine. She'd somehow freed herself from the burning Truck 6 and crossed 50 yards of open ground under fire to save Tommy. "Who the hell are you?" Decker gasped. The woman didn't answer. She was too busy fighting the SS officer hand to hand, and despite her obvious injuries, she was winning. Every move was precise, economical, deadly. This wasn't a soldier. This was something else. The SS officer realized it too. His expression changed from arrogance to recognition, to pure terror in the space of a heartbeat. "Du bist," he started to say. The woman's hand flashed out, struck him in the throat, and he went down choking. "Get Reeves out of here," she snapped at Decker in perfect unaccented English. "And don't touch anything from Truck 6. The material is unstable, fatal if you're exposed for more than a few minutes." "Lady, I don't know who you are, but Dr. Sarah Hoffman, Manhattan Project. I was being transported to Berlin for interrogation." She grabbed the SS officer's collar and started dragging him toward the command car. This convoy wasn't just carrying prisoners and supplies. It was carrying me, the uranium samples I'd sabotaged from the German research facility at Haigerloch, and every document related to their atomic program. Decker's mind reeled. "The Germans had you working on." "The Germans had me captured while I was sabotaging their program. They thought they could force me to fix what I'd broken." She smiled, and it was not a nice smile. They were wrong. "And now we're going to make sure every piece of their research burns." An aircraft engine screamed overhead. Decker looked up to see one of the American P-47 seconds gliding in for a crash landing. Its propeller dead. Its pilot fighting for control. "Your flyboys are brave but stupid," Dr. Hoffman observed. "That one's about to become a crater." The P-47 hit the ground hard, bounced, hit again, and plowed through a field in a shower of dirt and torn metal. By some miracle, it stayed mostly intact. "Morrison!" Decker shouted. "Get men to that plane! If the pilot's alive, I want him breathing!" Around them, the battle had reached a fever pitch. The American prisoners, armed now with captured weapons, were fighting with the fury of men who had nothing left to lose. The German convoy was in complete disarray, vehicles burning, soldiers fleeing or surrendering. But in the sky above, the real battle was far from over. 4,000 feet, the last stand. Lieutenant Sarah Chen was out of ammunition, almost out of fuel, and being pursued by 2 Me-109 seconds, whose pilots seemed personally offended by her continued existence. "Red 6 to any remaining red flight," she gasped into her radio. I am Winchester, Bingo Fuel, and in deep trouble. Could use some help here. Red 3 to Red 6. Marcus Webb's voice came through, calm, despite the circumstances. I'm on my way. But Chen, I need you to do something crazy. Crazier than this? When I tell you kill your engine. That's suicide. That's the plan. Trust me. Chen didn't have many options left. Copy. Standing by. She could hear the German fighters behind her, closing in for the kill. Her airspeed was dropping. Any second now, they'd have a perfect shot. Now, Webb shouted. Chen hit the mixture control, killing her engine. The Thunderbolt, already struggling, immediately began to fall from the sky like a brick. The two Me-109 seconds, expecting her to try to escape, overshot. And as they passed above her, Webb's P-47 appeared from below, climbing through the gap at full throttle, guns blazing. He caught the first 109 perfectly, his 50 cals, tearing into the engine, cowling. The German aircraft staggered, belched black smoke, and began a slow spiral downward. The second 109 broke hard right, but Webb was already turning inside him. It should have been impossible. The Thunderbolt was heavier, less maneuverable. But Webb was flying beyond the aircraft's limits, beyond his own limits, driven by the desperate mathematics that if Chen died, they were down to 3 pilots, and 3 pilots couldn't win this fight. The German pilot was good. He scissored, trying to force an overshoot. Webb stayed with him. They dove together, altitude bleeding away, both aircraft shaking from the stress. The ground came up fast. The German would have to pull out soon or crater. He pulled out. Webb didn't. For one impossible moment, Webb kept diving, kept pressing, his finger locked on the trigger. The German aircraft flew into his stream of fire and disintegrated. Then Webb pulled up, so close to the ground that his propeller kicked up debris. So close that Chen, restarting her engine and leveling off, was certain she just watched him die. But the P-47 climbed away, damaged but flying. Red 3 to Red 6. Webb's voice was shaky now, the adrenaline finally catching up with him. You can thank me later. Right now, we need to. The radio erupted with static and a new voice, German accented but speaking English. American pilots. This is Hauptmann Erich Hartmann, Jagdgeschwader 52. I have been monitoring your frequency. Chen and Webb exchanged glances across miles of sky. Hartmann. The name was legendary. Over 300 confirmed kills. The most dangerous fighter pilot in the Luftwaffe. I am 10 kilometers south with 8 aircraft, the German continued. I will arrive in 3 minutes. You are out of fuel and ammunition. Your leader has crashed. You cannot win. Chen's finger moved to her transmit button, but Webb beat her to it. Hauptmann, this is Red 3. With respect, sir, you're probably right. But we're not leaving. Not until that convoy is destroyed. There was a long pause. Then, why? The convoy is broken. The vehicles burn. You have achieved your objective. Because there are American prisoners down there, Webb said simply, and we don't leave our people behind. Another pause, longer this time. Chen could almost hear Hartmann thinking, processing this irrational American commitment. When the German spoke again, his voice had changed. Not softer exactly, but different. I understand. In your position, I would do the same. A pause. My aircraft will arrive in 2 minutes. I suggest you use this time wisely. Hartmann, out. The radio went silent. Chen stared at her fuel gauge. It showed empty. Had been showing empty for the last 5 minutes. Her engine was running on nothing but will and prayer. Red 3. Did that Nazi bastard just give us a warning? I think he gave us a chance, Webb replied. 2 minutes. Let's make them count. Below them, on the ground, Sergeant Decker and his liberated prisoners were systematically destroying what remained of the convoy. Dr. Hoffman was setting charges on the vehicles carrying research documents, ensuring nothing would survive. And in a field beyond the flames, Private Morrison and 3 other men were pulling Captain James Morrison, callsign Hawk, from the wreckage of his P-47. He was alive, barely conscious, but alive. The ghost convoy was dead. The prisoners were free. The German atomic research was burning. But the cost had been horrific. And in 2 minutes, now 90 seconds, the Luftwaffe's most deadly ace was going to arrive with overwhelming force. Chen looked at her fuel gauge one more time. Then at her gun switch. Empty. Red 3 to Red 6. Webb's voice was quiet now. "It's been an honor flying with you." "Honor's mine, Red 3. Let's give Hartman a show he'll remember." They turned south. 2 battered P-47 Thunderbolts with no fuel, no ammunition, and no chance. Flying toward a legend, toward certain death, toward everything their training told them to avoid. Flying because that's what you did when your people were on the ground. Flying because sometimes impossible odds were just a starting point. The dawn was fully broken now, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. Beautiful, Chen thought. If you had to die, this wasn't a bad sky to do it under. Then her radio crackled one more time. A new voice. American. Excited. "All Red Flight aircraft, this is Falcon Leader. We're a full squadron out of the 365th, 12 P-47 seconds, Angels 20, and we've got your position." "Hold on, cavalry's coming." Chen felt tears sting her eyes. "Falcon Leader, this is Red 6. You've got German fighters inbound. 8 Me-109 seconds, led by Erich Hartmann himself." "Copy that, Red 6. We've heard of him." The pilot sounded almost eager. Be ashamed to fly all this way and not meet the famous Hauptmann. "All Falcon aircraft, tally-ho." The sky erupted with aircraft. 12 fresh P-47 seconds. Fully loaded, well-rested pilots. Diving in from the east like avenging angels. And from the south, 8 black crosses, marking Me-109 seconds that had never lost a fight. They met in the middle of the sky, over a burning convoy, over freed prisoners, over the wreckage of impossible courage. And the real battle began. The sky became a whirling dance of death. 12 American P-47 Thunderbolts versus 8 German Me-109 seconds. On paper, the Americans had the numbers. But Hauptmann Erich Hartmann didn't fight on paper. He fought in 3 dimensions of air and wind, with an instinct for combat that bordered on supernatural. Lieutenant Sarah Chen watched as Hartmann's aircraft, marked with a distinctive black tulip on the nose, tore through the American formation like a shark through a school of fish. He moved differently than other pilots. No wasted motion, no hesitation, just pure predatory efficiency. "Falcon 3 is hit." The radio erupted with panic. He's on me, I can't shake him." Chen tried to help, but her fuel-starved engine coughed and nearly quit. She was flying a dead aircraft through willpower alone. Then she saw something that made her forget about fuel, forget about fear, forget about everything except pure tactical opportunity. Hartmann had committed to his attack run on Falcon 3. For exactly 2 seconds, his Me-109 would be in a predictable flight path. 2 seconds where an aircraft coming from his blind spot could get a shot. Chen's guns were empty, but Webb's weren't. "Red 3, I'm going to spot for you," Chen said calmly. "When I say shoot, you shoot. Don't think, don't aim, just trust me." "Chen, what are you?" "Just do it. I've got the angle, you've got the trigger. Together we take him." It was insane. Fighter pilots didn't work like that. You flew your own aircraft, made your own decisions. But Chen had spent 300 hours flying with Webb. She knew how he moved, how he thought, how he flew. She dove, putting herself between Hartmann and his target, knowing she was making herself bait. The German ace saw her immediately, and his tactical computer, that brilliant, deadly brain, calculated the new equation. Damaged American aircraft. No ammunition. Barely flying. Easy kill. Or ignore it and finish the original target. Hartmann made his choice. He broke off from Falcon 3 and turned toward Chen. "No, Webb. 30 degrees right. Pull lead by 2 aircraft lengths. Shoot now. Webb didn't hesitate. He fired blind, trusting Chen's geometry completely. The stream of 50 caliber rounds passed within 10 feet of Chen's aircraft. She felt the turbulence as the bullets carved through air where Hartman would be in 1 more second. The German pilot saw the trap at the last instant. He broke hard, yanking his Me-109 into a turn that should have torn the wings off. The aircraft held together, but one of Webb's rounds caught the tail section, tearing through control cables. Hartman's aircraft shuddered, slewed sideways, and began to fall. "He's going down!" Falcon leader shouted. "You got him! You got Hartman!" But Chen was watching the spiraling Me-109, and something didn't look right. The spin was too controlled, the fall too deliberate. "He's not hit," Chen said quietly. "He's withdrawing." And she was right. At 1,000 feet, Hartman's aircraft suddenly recovered, the spin becoming controlled flight. He leveled off, waggled his wings once in a salute that could have been respect or mockery, and turned east, flying away from the battle. The remaining German fighters, seeing their leader disengage, broke off and followed. The battle was over. The Americans had won, but as Chen's engine finally died completely, and she began her glide toward an emergency landing, she realized something that sent a chill down her spine. Hartman hadn't been beaten. He'd been testing them, measuring them, and now he knew exactly what they were capable of. "This isn't over," she whispered to herself as the ground came up to meet her. On the ground, the wreckage, Captain Hawk Morrison regained consciousness to the smell of burning chemicals and the sound of someone screaming. For a moment, he couldn't remember where he was or why everything hurt. Then, memory crashed back. The convoy, the dive, the crash. "Easy, sir. Easy." It was Private Morrison, no relation, pressing a canteen to his lips. "You flew into a tree at about 100 miles an hour. That you're alive is a miracle. That you can still move is, well, let's call it 2 miracles." Hawk tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. His ribs were probably broken, definitely bruised, possibly on fire. "The prisoners?" he managed to gasp. "Free, sir. Most of them, anyway. We lost some in the fighting." Morrison's voice went quiet, including the one who marked the target. "Tommy Reeves died getting us the intelligence we needed." Hawk closed his eyes. Another name to remember. Another ghost to carry. The convoy? Destroyed. Mostly. "But Captain, there's something you need to see." Morrison helped Hawk to his feet and half carried him toward what remained of the command car. A woman in a tattered uniform was there, along with Sergeant Decker and several other freed prisoners. They were standing around the captured SS officer, who was tied to a vehicle and looking significantly less arrogant than before. "Captain Morrison," the woman said as he approached. "Dr. Sarah Hoffman, we need to talk. Now." Hawk's head was still spinning, but he forced himself to focus. "Doctor, I saw what was in that truck. Uranium, right? German atomic research?" "That's what they wanted everyone to think," Dr. Hoffman said grimly. "But it wasn't the real cargo. It was a decoy." She grabbed Hawk's arm and led him toward a vehicle that had somehow survived the battle intact. It was an armored truck, heavily reinforced, with cooling systems built into the walls. "The uranium was real enough," she continued, "but it was low-grade material, basically useless. The Germans were using it as a distraction. What they were really transporting was this." She opened the back of the truck. Inside, packed in ice and surrounded by monitoring equipment, were 12 metal cylinders. Each one was about the size of a thermos, covered in warning labels in German, and connected to what looked like a primitive battery system. "What am I looking at?" Hawk asked. "Viral samples," Dr. Hoffman said flatly. "Weaponized plague, anthrax, smallpox, and 3 other pathogens I don't even recognize. enough concentrated disease to kill millions. The Germans were developing biological weapons in parallel with their atomic research. This convoy was transporting their entire stockpile to a secure facility in Berlin. Hawk felt his blood turn to ice. If we'd destroyed this truck, the pathogens would have been released into the air. This entire region would have become a death zone. Every village, every town, everyone who fought here today would be infected within hours, dead within days. She looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. Tommy Reeves didn't just mark the uranium truck. He marked the only truck we could safely destroy. He knew. Somehow, he figured it out. How? I told him. It was the SS officer, speaking for the first time. His English was perfect. His voice cultivated. Right before your Private Reeves marked the target, I told him exactly what we were carrying. I wanted him to know that his sacrifice would mean nothing, that even if you destroyed the convoy, you would kill yourselves in the process. Decker stepped forward and hit the German so hard his head snapped back. You son of a... Wait. Hawk held up a hand. Something wasn't adding up. You told him. You warned an American prisoner about biological weapons. Why? The SS officer smiled through bloodied teeth. Because I wanted to see what he would do. Would he sacrifice himself knowing it was futile? Would his courage fail? The smile widened. It didn't. He marked the uranium truck anyway. He chose to save you all even though he believed I was transporting something worse. That is what I wanted to measure. American resolve. American stupidity. They are, I have found, often the same thing. Dr. Hoffman's hand moved faster than Hawk could follow. She grabbed the German's collar and yanked him forward. Where are the other convoys? The SS officer's smile vanished. What? You heard me. This wasn't the only one. This was a test run. You wanted to see if American pilots would attack vehicles carrying their own dead, whether our moral hesitation could be weaponized. You were gathering data. Her voice dropped to something cold and terrible. Where are the others? The German said nothing. Dr. Hoffman pulled out a syringe from her pocket. This is from one of your own biological samples. A fast-acting strain. You'll die in about 6 hours, and it won't be pleasant. Or you can tell me what I want to know. You wouldn't dare, the officer said. But his voice wavered. I've spent 6 months in German captivity. They tried to torture information out of me. They failed. Want to know why? She brought the syringe closer. Because I'm not afraid of doing terrible things to terrible people. Hawk should have stopped her. Should have reminded her about Geneva Conventions and the rules of war. But something in him, the part that had watched Kowalski die, watched Tommy Reeves sacrifice himself, watched all of it. That part wanted answers more than it wanted honor. The SS officer saw it in his eyes, saw that the Americans' moral certainty had cracked. There are 3 more convoys, he said quietly. 1 heading to Munich, 1 to Hamburg, 1 to Berchtesgaden, all carrying biological weapons, all protected by prisoners, all set to arrive within 48 hours. How do we identify them? You can't. They're using different markings, different routes, different tactics. We learned from this convoy. We adapted. He looked at Dr. Hoffman. You destroyed 1 ghost convoy. Congratulations. 3 more are already in the wind. 0630. Hours. The aftermath. The freed prisoners stood in a loose circle around the smoldering remains of the convoy. 27 Americans had survived. 16 had not. The bodies were laid out in a row, covered with whatever fabric could be found. Tommy Reeves was among them. Hawk Morrison stood at attention, his broken ribs screaming with every breath, and saluted each fallen soldier. Behind him, Lieutenant Chen and Lieutenant Webb did the same. They'd both survived their forced landings, though Chen's aircraft would never fly again. We won, Webb said quietly. Because it isn't, Hawk replied. It's a beginning. Dr. Hoffman approached, wiping blood from her hands. I've radioed Supreme Headquarters. They're sending everything they have to intercept the other convoys. Every available aircraft, every ground unit, every intelligence asset. But it's a long shot. The Germans have 48 hours head start. Will we stop them? Jen asked. I don't know, Dr. Hoffman admitted. But I know we'll try. Sergeant Decker joined them, his face haggard. Captain Morrison, permission to speak freely? Granted. That German officer, the SS bastard. He's right about one thing. We are stupid. Decker looked at the row of bodies. We risk everything for each other. We make impossible choices. We sacrifice ourselves for people we've never met. By any rational calculation, it's insane. Your point, Sergeant? My point is that maybe that's our advantage. The Germans calculate, they plan, they think war is mathematics and cruelty. Decker's voice grew stronger. But we're not fighting with math. We're fighting with something they can't calculate. Something that makes a kid like Tommy Reeves climb onto a truck roof and mark targets while enemy soldiers shoot at him. Something that makes pilots fly into battles they can't win because their people are on the ground. Hope? Chen suggested. Stubbornness, Decker corrected. Stupid, irrational, American stubbornness. And I'll take that over German efficiency any day. Hawk felt something shift in his chest. The weight didn't get lighter. It never would. But somehow, it became bearable. All right, he said. Falcon Squadron is still airborne. We've got ground forces moving in. Dr. Hoffman has the intelligence. Sergeant Decker has 43 freed prisoners who know how these convoys operate. He looked at each of them in turn. We've got 48 hours to find 3 needles in a haystack the size of Western Europe. Anyone have any ideas? Just one, Dr. Hoffman said. The SS officer told us there are 3 convoys, but he's lying. Everyone turned to stare at her. There are 4 convoys, she continued. I found manifests in the command car. The Germans were running a shell game. 3 decoys and 1 real bioweapon shipment. The officer gave us the decoys because he knew we'd waste resources chasing them. Then where's the real one? Webb demanded. Doctor. Hoffman pulled out a map, crumpled and stained with blood. It's heading north, toward the coast, toward a U-boat pen at Lorient. They're planning to ship the weapons to America. The silence that followed was absolute. How long do we have? Hawk asked. The convoy left yesterday. It has a 24-hour head start. If it reaches Lorient, if those U-boats launch. She didn't need to finish the sentence. New York, Washington, Boston. Every major American city could be hit with weaponized plague before anyone even knew the weapons had left Europe. Hawk looked up at the sky. The sun was fully risen now, burning away the last of the fog. Somewhere up there, Hauptmann Hartmann was flying back to his base, already planning the next engagement. Somewhere in the Atlantic, U-boats were preparing to carry death to American shores. And somewhere between here and the coast, a convoy of ghosts was racing toward a future too terrible to imagine. We need to move, Hawk said. Now, Webb, Chen, find me every pilot who can still fly. Decker, organize the prisoners into search teams. Doctor. Hoffman. I need everything you know about that convoy's route. Captain, Chen said gently. You just crashed. Your aircraft is scrap. You can barely stand. Then I'll fly someone else's aircraft. Hawk straightened despite the pain. We stopped one ghost convoy at dawn. We'll stop the next one before sunset. And if we can't? Webb asked. Hawk thought about Tommy Reeves climbing onto that truck roof. Thought about Kowalski fighting until his aircraft fell from the sky. Thought about every pilot who'd ever flown into impossible odds because someone on the ground needed them. Then we'll die trying, he said simply. Because that's what we do. Epilogue. IMC. 3 months later. The letter arrived at Hawk Morrison's quarters on a cold March morning. It was postmarked from Switzerland. Sent through the Red Cross. Inside was a single sheet of paper with German handwriting. Captain Morrison. I trust this letter finds you well. I wanted you to know that I have been informed of the outcome of your mission. All 4 convoys were intercepted. The biological weapons were destroyed. Many lives were saved. You lost 12 more pilots stopping those convoys. I lost 4. The war continues, and we will meet again in the sky. I write this not as an enemy, but as one pilot to another. What your Private Reeves did that morning, the sacrifice, the courage, it haunts me still. In all my years of combat, I have never seen such bravery from a man who knew his death would change nothing, except it changed everything. You Americans fight with your hearts where we fight with our minds. It makes you dangerous, more dangerous than you know. When this war ends, and it will end, Captain, though perhaps not as either of us would wish, remember this. You did not win because you were smarter, or stronger, or better equipped. You won because you were willing to be ghosts, to sacrifice everything for people you would never meet, to fly into dawn with empty guns and full hearts. That is something we could never calculate, and ultimately, it is why you will prevail. Until we meet again in the sky, Hauptmann Erich Hartmann, Jagdgeschwader, 52. Hawk folded the letter carefully and placed it in his footlocker, next to the citation for Tommy Reeves' posthumous Medal of Honor. Outside his window, a new flight of P-47 seconds was taking off into the morning sky. Young pilots, fresh from training, heading toward their first combat mission. Ghosts in the making. Hawk whispered a prayer for them and returned to his briefing notes. The war wasn't over. It would never really be over. But for one dawn in December, a handful of pilots and prisoners had held the line against darkness. And sometimes Hawk thought that was enough. Sometimes that was everything.